Welcome into the VOLatile podcast, your weekly reminder that being a Vols fan is a terminal diagnosis that we all share. My name is Mac Williams, and I'm joined tonight by my good friend Nick Duncan. Nick, how are you doing tonight, man?
Hey, doing well, doing about as good as a guy can be doing. I mean,
Yeah,
as good as a terminal Vols fan could be doing, I suppose.
absolutely. Better than our other friends who just constantly bail on us every time we record an episode.
Yeah,
So,
well, it's hard to find good help these days, as they say.
yeah. Why pay one of them fellows when you could find an illegal to do the job better anyways? You know what I
That's
mean?
what I'm saying. Yeah.
Oh man. Well, listener, we have a fun episode for you tonight. We're gonna open up and talk about some different content tonight. We're going to talk about the toughest stadiums to play in that we've personally been to. So we were inspired. I'm an avid Josh Pate listener. And so Josh Pate did his top 10 toughest places to play. And so we kind of got inspired by that. And so we're going to talk about that tonight. So we'll do that. Spoiler alert, Josh Pate had Neyland Stadium as the number one toughest place to play. So we were excited to see that. So we'll do that near the end of the show after we talk about Tennessee stuff. Getting into kind of latest news with Tennessee basketball, we lost to Vanderbilt on Saturday night, and therefore we missed the double bye opportunity today as the SC tournament started. So we will face Auburn as they knocked off Mississippi State tonight or this afternoon. We will face them tomorrow at 2 p.m. Central Time in the SEC tournament. And then Tennessee baseball has gone 3-1 since our last recording. We took the first two games out of three against Wright State, and then we absolutely obliterated Tennessee Tech last night. And so that was obviously a good win, just because Tennessee Tech's not a pushover always in baseball. So it's always nice to get a midweek win.
It's
And
good to beat little
in
brother.
Absolutely, absolutely. So we'll go ahead and jump into basketball since that's kind of hot and heavy right now with the SC tournament. So going back to Saturday night, so again, Tennessee lost to Vanderbilt at home, 82-86 was the final score of that game. So I know it's kind of hard, Nick, to put yourself in the shoes of Saturday night, but it's just because we're so far removed and we've kind of snapped and cleared, if you will, from that. Now it's like we're focused on the SEC tournament. Kind of
New
doesn't even feel
season.
like,
Yep.
yeah, it doesn't even feel like that big of a deal that we lost that game. Although obviously it was extremely frustrating when we did lose it. But did you have any thoughts about that game? Anything you remember from Saturday night when you watched us lose that one?
Um, I thought we would lose. I think we all kind of said that. So I wasn't shocked that we lost the game. I guess I was shocked that we were so bad offensively in the first half, particularly. Um, Gillespie continues to be the bane of my existence because that guy just can't get it on all cylinders. Like he had, I don't know how many turnovers he had in the first few minutes, but it was a few at least. And so he reversed his last 5 minutes of the game to his first 5 minutes of the game and just turned the ball over a lot. They got down. Um, did they only score 22 in the first half? Is that
Man, it was something. I mean, we were down what, like 10 or
it
something at
was
that.
it was pretty bad. Like the fact that
Yeah,
we lost by four was honestly shocking because
for sure.
that game was pretty bad. So offensively in the first half. So I don't know, just that we couldn't do really anything like inside. We couldn't really hit any shots. Um, we talk about it a lot, but Rick Barnes' teams go on droughts, but it just felt like they were never going to be able to put the ball in the bucket. So second half was encouraging. I mean, they battled back. They definitely didn't quit, but definitely thought they would lose without Nate, and assuming that Gillespie doesn't score 30, which is not usually a thing you can count on. He can do
Right.
it, but it's just not something that you count on. So I don't know. It is what it is. It was a bummer to lose. I thought we would lose it, but it's like you said. It's kind of like, okay, new season. Let's see
Right.
what happens. Nate's coming back, hopefully. So we'll see what happens.
Yeah, I'd say the only thing that two things. One that you didn't mention that I obviously know that is that Amari Evans had a great game, kind of a
Yeah.
breakout game.
Yep.
And so that was encouraging just to see somebody else step up without Nate Ament playing and kind of take on a bigger role. And so I was encouraged to see that. Obviously, I think if Nate Ament plays tomorrow, Amari Evans probably is not going to have as good of a game as he had against Vanderbilt. But I do think that if Amari Evans can be a bigger part of the offense moving forwards, that only helps you. Um,
Absolutely.
so I was glad to see him. He played really well, played a tough game, and he's kind of really established himself. I think a lot of people are high on Bishop Boswell for his just being kind of a glue guy, defensive player, gritty player.
Plays hard, a
There's a
lot of hustle.
right. There's a part of me that thinks Amari Evans is the better version of Bishop Boswell. Um, and or maybe the more complete version is the way I should say it, because his offensive game, even as a young guy, seems a little bit more complete than Bishop Boswell's. And he also seems a little bit more athletic than Bishop Boswell, but he also seems to have that kind of gritty team guy thing that Boswell has. So I've kind of grown, I guess, if I had to just choose who I'm more fond of from a who would I want on my team perspective, I think I would go with Evans over Boswell. What do you think about that?
Yeah, I mean, the way he's played the last couple games, I mean, that's hard to argue with. He does seem to have all the similar tools and a higher ceiling. I
Right.
think basically would sum up kind of what you're saying is like he has a higher ceiling and he seems like he's pushing towards that here late in the season. And so, I mean, you've got your offense is pretty abysmal right now. So like
Mm-hmm.
he can score the ball. So like why not ride with him? Is kind of my thought.
Yeah, no, absolutely, absolutely, and obviously, I don't think Boswell's minutes should be like I don't think he
Yeah,
should lose minutes or
I'm
anything.
not
But
saying like he should sit the bench. Yeah,
right, right. But I have been impressed, I guess, with Evans's growth throughout the season. It feels like he's kind of become a really important player on this team. When we at the beginning of the season, we just didn't know for sure if he would be that or not.
100%.
The second thing I was going to mention from the game is that I felt like without Nate Ament, so we already established, Mari Evans kind of took a bigger step in this game and had a more important role. But without Nate Ament, I really expected Tennessee to play through the big men more than they did against Vanderbilt. And I thought the big men as a whole, just all of our kind of power forward centers type players, I thought they played pretty well against Vanderbilt. And so I was a little disappointed that we did not feed the post more and didn't kind of try and draw out that advantage we have against Vanderbilt. And so I was just a little, I guess, disappointed in whether it's just the guards, how they're running the offense on the floor, or maybe Rick wasn't calling sets that kind of emphasize post play. I'm not sure, but wherever that didn't happen, I think we should have leaned on that more. And I think that you might have found a way to win that game if you take the pressure off the guards early and prevent those early turnovers and instead feed the post and just play kind of a more traditional big man focused game. I wonder if that game's not closer and then you find a way to win at the end.
Yeah, I think that's super fair. I think what I said was like I was disappointed that we didn't. I don't remember how I said it, but however I said it, what I really want to be more clear is that basically I agree with you. Whatever South Carolina's bad, but
Right.
we were so dominant inside in that game that you would feel like let's just build off of that and keep doing more of that or trying
Right.
to do more of that against Vanderbilt, like you said, especially in light of the fact that Nate Mint is definitely
Mm-hmm.
not playing that in that
Mm-hmm.
game. And like you said, either we just wouldn't or couldn't, or I don't know whose decision that was or if that's just the way it played out, but um, it seems like there should have been a more conscious effort to battle inside more. That's clearly where our strength is, which is weird for a Rick Barnes team because it's usually
Right.
all about guard play, but our guards are average SEC guards, I would say, this year. So
Yeah. No, for sure. I think that's a fair assessment. So I mean, really, like we already kind of said, it feels weird to talk about the Vanderbilt game because it seems so unimportant now. So
yeah,
I think if you're good, we'll just kind of go ahead and
yeah,
look at tomorrow. So
let's do it. Let's ride.
yeah, tomorrow, Tennessee plays Auburn. As I said earlier, Auburn beat Mississippi State today 79-61, so not necessarily a close game for an SEC tournament game. And I just wanted to know, we've already played Auburn once this year. We beat them. What are your expectations coming into this game with this matchup?
Yeah, I I've been thinking about this a bit just since I saw the bracket and thinking about how it might play out. And I just really feel like Auburn or Mississippi State either won this whole time. I've been thinking like we should at least just win this first game.
Yeah.
Like there's just no reason why we shouldn't be Auburn or Mississippi State. We are better than both of these teams. Um, it's just the crazy thing about this team this year, which is that they can literally lose to anyone and they can literally beat anyone. And
Hmm.
so it just feels so mental with them. And there are variables. I know we need to talk about Nate. Like, how many minutes does Nate play? Does he, it's the first time this season that he's really been hurt. And does he trust his body? And they've been saying, like, oh, he wants to play. He could have played in all these games, and they've just kind of been extra cautious. Like, how good's he going to be being cold? Is the team going to kind of go right back to playing the way that they were before he got hurt? Um, I really don't know. Like, I feel like we should win. I won't be super shocked if we lose. I'm not gonna lie.
Yeah, I think you kind of nailed it with as far as like Nate to me seems like kind of where this game is hinging. So obviously, if Auburn comes in and they're shooting the ball really well and they're playing the offensive game they want to play, Tennessee's going to have a tough time winning this game no matter what. I mean, Auburn could have and could have won the game that we played early in the year. I wouldn't say they should have, but Tennessee had a lead in that game. Auburn kind of battled back, made it a close game. We held on to win, but I really feel like if Auburn's at their best, based on how Tennessee's been playing down the stretch, they can beat us.
Oh yeah,
But I think if Nate plays, and I'm assuming he will, is that what you're assuming as well? You think he'll play?
that seems to be the vibe that I'm getting, is that he's
Yeah,
gonna play. I don't know if he'll play as many minutes as what he typically plays,
right.
but it does seem that like he's gonna play. Yeah,
Right. So assuming he plays, and I think he will too. I mean, I think it'd be dumb not to play him, frankly, because if you do lose,
he's
then
got to knock the rust off. Like,
right. So I do agree. I think he'll probably play some. I don't want to say limited minutes because I think they'll play him as much as they feel comfortable playing him. And so if he comes in there and he looks fine and he's playing confident, he's playing well, I could see him ending up, with 30, 35 minutes on the floor. But I also don't think they're gonna. That depends on game script too, right? If Tennessee's up 20, they're not gonna leave him in the game, But if it's a close game and Nate's playing well and he seems healthy, I think that's where you could see him playing more than maybe they expect him to play. But I do think Tennessee will. I do think Tennessee's will win. I think that we are going to play through our other guys. I hope that we're going to play through our bigs. I don't think Auburn's that good. I
yeah,
just don't have any faith in Stephen Pearl. I
nope,
don't believe that Stephen Pearl can outcoach Rick Barnes really in any way. And so I think that
he's
if
not a
assuming
VFL.
yeah, not a VFL, get out of here, Stephen. I don't care where you got your degree from. Uh, but yeah, I mean, I don't see a way that Tennessee within themselves loses this game, right? So if they play their basketball, even if they don't score particularly well, or even if they don't defend particularly well, I still think Tennessee will win this game. The only way that we lose is if we have a catastrophic day offensively, we're not defending the 3-point line, and Auburn's on. If all those things are happening, well, yeah, of course Tennessee can lose. It's SC
Sure.
tournament, anything can happen. But assuming that Tennessee comes out and plays a game that's similar to how they can play, and Auburn plays a game similar to how they can play, I see this game being kind of like a low 70s kind of scoring game where maybe Tennessee wins like 74-69 or something like
Yep.
that.
I think it's about right. I think they should win. I think they will win. I really hope they win, not because I think even if Tennessee were to beat Auburn and then likely play Vanderbilt again and beat them, I don't think that they can beat Florida.
Right.
Um, but I do think the the prospect of Nate playing two games in this tournament to knock rust off before we get to the
Hmm.
big dance would be really helpful. Winning this
Yeah.
game, maybe having a limited role, and then playing Vanderbilt, even if you're competitive, even if you lose that game, I think that could be helpful for them just trying to get back into sync to have a couple games to get ready for the NCAA tournament.
Yeah, for sure. And I'm just double checking. Do we have okay, yeah. So if we beat Auburn, we play Vanderbilt, which we're gonna talk about that in a second. And then if we were to beat Vanderbilt, yeah, you're right. We would play Florida after that. Okay.
Probably Florida, yeah.
So yeah. So yeah, let's talk about the Vanderbilt situation. So let's go ahead and just say, I mean, I don't want to chalk it up as a win tomorrow. I obviously think Tennessee's gonna have to show up and play, but assuming that we do win tomorrow, how do you think that game against Vanderbilt goes on Friday?
Yeah. I think it's kind of a coin toss. I definitely think we can win. I mean, we've beat them
Hmm.
once. We played pretty bad the other night and still were in that game at the end. And so if Nate comes back and knocks some rust off and we, beat Auburn, um, I'm going to say that we're going to beat Vandy in the rubber match. I think we can, and I think we will. I think our guys will be hopped up to win that game. And yeah, so I'm going to say that we beat Auburn. I'm just going to call my shot. I'm going to say we beat Auburn and beat Vanderbilt and then lose to Florida.
Nice, nice, yeah. And I think I'd be happy with that result. Obviously, of course, you'd love to beat Florida, love to make a run. But I just don't think this team has what it takes to beat Florida,
Yeah,
especially neutral side and in a game that matters. It doesn't seem like Tennessee really
they're
has
just they're just a matchup nightmare for us. I mean, they just
right.
are. Yeah,
Yeah, but yeah, I do think that Tennessee will have a lot to play for against Vanderbilt in that game for pride, of course, but also, I heard it probably was Grant Ramey, but I can't say for sure. But someone was talking about how if Tennessee does make a run and beats Auburn, beats Vanderbilt, that it's likely that Tennessee will jump Vanderbilt in the NCAA tournament seeding. So we would kind of guarantee ourselves like higher a higher selection in the 5 seed line,
yeah,
and Vanderbilt will probably be a lower selection on that same line, or maybe even drop to the 6 seed line. And so I do think that could be a big boost going into the
yeah.
tournament if you can beat Vanderbilt and
The
kind
coveted 5 seed playing the 12 seed.
of
Yeah,
exactly, yeah, the dangerous spot. But yeah, so I do think that Tennessee will have a lot to play for, and I am pretty confident that we can beat Vanderbilt. But it is in Nashville. You got to think that if Vanderbilt fans were ever going to show up, this would be the year
yep,
they would do that.
yep.
So I don't know. We'll see. It might feel like it probably won't feel like a road game. I've never been to the SC tournament. From what I hear, though, any game that you go to, because I guess they sell the tickets by session is how it works. And
Right.
so any game that you go to, it's always just like half full of Kentucky fans.
Yeah, that's what I've heard too. Yeah,
and so they're going to be rooting against Tennessee, so it probably
yeah.
will feel like a more hostile environment
Hostile. Yeah.
than it should, even though there's probably more Tennessee fans than Vanderbilt fans in the arena. But
Hey, we
anyways,
beat Vandy on their own floor. So
yeah, for sure. So yeah, I think we're kind of in alignment there. And so, listener, yeah, we play Auburn tomorrow at 2, like I said, and we'll play Vanderbilt on Friday if we beat Auburn tomorrow. So be tuned in for that. I know the midday games are hard to watch with work and things, but make sure you're following along as much as you can. And
just remember with basketball that like every day that passes, we're one day closer to a season with Cade Phillips. So
yeah, that'll be huge. What a boost for the team,
oh, dude, I can't wait.
Goodness gracious. I've never seen someone carry water for a player so mid as this. I take that back. Every Florida fan with Tim Tebow ever. But anyways, oh me. Oh gosh. Tim Tebow is absolutely mid, but that's where I'm going to leave that. So, all right. So let's go ahead and move on to baseball. I think we're good on basketball. So baseball is our favorite subject here of these two sports. So I'm excited to get into this with you.
Yeah, let's do it.
So we had our weekend series this past weekend. Tennessee did win the series. They beat Wright State in game 1, 4-3 on a Manny Marin walk-off. And in game 2, they won 5-4. So both the first 2 games are a one-run decision there.
Shout out Drew Gilbert, walk-off against Wright State.
Absolutely. It seems like we play Wright State, we can only win by 1 run. So,
That's it.
But then game 3 was pretty horrible. So Tennessee dropped that one. 6-0 was the final score there. Wright State held Tennessee scoreless in game 3. So, Nick, let's just go ahead and jump into the general stuff. What were your thoughts from this weekend?
Yeah. I do think it was probably our starters' worst weekend so far. But I continue to be confident in the fact that they give you a chance to win every game. Outside of, I know 6-0 is a shellacking, but there's no reason why in college baseball you shouldn't be in a game even when the opponent scores 6 runs. So
Well said.
I just think your pitching did enough there that you should have been in that game. The only game so far that we've really gotten blown out is that UCLA game. Every other game we've been in it. And even that game, our starting pitching kept us in it. We were only down 1 run when our starter came out of the game, or
Yep.
2. I think he gave up a solo shot and then came out. We were down 2.
That's right.
But nevertheless, like I continue to take that away, that I'm still thankful for our starting pitching. I also continue to to say that of the two problems of like starting pitching or hitting the ball, that I'm thankful that hitting the ball, like it's just you can foresee a team figuring it out at the plate. It is hard to foresee even, a few weekends into a season feeling like your starting pitching is going to turn around if it's been abysmal.
Absolutely.
And so,
Absolutely. Yeah, go ahead.
yeah, so those are my biggest takeaways. I'm also impressed that we frankly have not been very good, and we've still won a lot of games so far. And so they have found ways to win,
Mm-hmm.
even when they've not been very good. And so I just feel like if they can get over the hump and start having better approaches at the plate, that game 3 against Wright State was bad. I mean, Elander said it in the post game. He was like, "Don't hit the ball in the air." Like I can't remember how many times they popped out, but it felt like a billion.
Mm-hmm.
And like they've just got to put the ball in play and have a better approach at the plate. So that just continues to be the biggest problem. I mean, I don't know. It just feels like more of the same, honestly. And Wright State's a good baseball program, so I'm glad to win 2 out of 3 against them. Like they put Vandy out last year in the postseason. They played us tough in the postseason, of course, and I guess that was 21. And so they're kind of been there for the last several years. So it's not like it's a huge deal to drop one to Wright State. You won the series, but they've just got to start hitting the ball.
Yeah, no, for sure. And go back to what you're saying about starting pitching. So I agree. I think that, kind of a parallel that's coming to mind for me is like a starting pitcher is kind of in a way similar to like a kicker in football as far as like mentality goes. So like, we think back to the season last year and, when Max Gilbert misses that kick against Georgia, obviously the game was big. It was a horrible missed kick. There was also obviously some coaching things that went into there. So it wasn't like everyone was like, oh, Max is done. But there was this thing in the back of your mind that started then. It never quit because really Max wasn't able to kick his way out of it. But there was always just this doubt in your mind that he was going to figure it out and going to be able to make big kicks, right?
Yep.
And obviously it proved to be that he didn't really make any kicks that were in a positive way decisive for the team. He made more kicks than he missed, of course. Obviously, if he missed more kicks, it would have been worse. But there was no point where he won you a game on his leg, right? I mean, it wasn't like he had a Chase McGrath type moment,
He's no bloodbath.
And so that's right. And so I think of starting pitching kind of similarly in that really the only way to fix a starting pitcher if they're in their head and they're not executing their pitches well is to try a new starting pitcher. Like you can move them to a different day in the weekend. But you're pretty much just having to try something else. If you want to
put a guy in the pen and bring him out and let him throw and you just tell this guy, like, you're going to throw 1 inning, you're going to throw 20 pitches,
right?
And try to get him out of his funk. Let him see the ball go through the hoop kind of thing.
Yeah.
Like, go out and give us 1 good inning and let's build from there.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. I hear what you're saying.
Yeah, I mean, you think of the 2024 season, National Championship season, right? Tony Vitello did that, and I can't remember who started. Was it AJ? AJ? No, not AJ Russell. It was whoever was remember, it was on Friday nights. He would start that guy for 1 inning, and he would pull it.
Yeah,
and that was what we did at Causey. Was it Causey? I think it was Causey.
Yeah, AJ Causey.
I think so. Maybe I was right with AJ. So yeah, Causey would come in and he would, if that's who it is, and would throw the first inning, and then Vitello would pull him.
Yeah.
And so that's something that you can explore, right? If starting pitching gets bad, but even that is just not a traditional or long-term fix. Now, obviously it worked for the 2014, but the 2014 was also scoring 10 runs a game.
Gosh.
So
yeah,
so it really, you had more room to play with your pitching in a season like that. This season, you don't have that. So to your point, I think that if I had to choose one of these problems, I would rather it be at the plate. But obviously, our struggles at the plate seem, and again, we haven't gotten SEC play, so the verdict's still out. There's no one, the season isn't over by any means. But of course, if we fast forward a month from now and we're still having the same problems, then it's going to be well, this team's just not very good at the plate,
Yeah.
And that will be a bad problem to have. But as it stands right now, if you had to choose one of the problems, you'd rather be struggling at the plate. And so I agree with you there. Pitchers are just kind of head cases,
Yep.
so I would rather our pitchers feel confident and be succeeding right now, and the guys at the plate, being able to figure it out. And you got to think just practically, right? Like a starting pitcher only throws once a week, really. And
Yep.
so but these guys are hitting, they're hitting, upwards of, I mean, at least 9 times in a weekend, and likely most of the time more probably like 15 or 20, so, getting 15 at bats in a weekend, you can get in a slump and out of a slump within that one
In the
weekend,
same weekend. Yeah.
But like on the mound though, you just can't. You have to wait a whole week to be able to kind of fix those issues, and
it's so much. It's a mental game because
Right.
you're sitting around thinking about it all week,
right,
and you're watching film, and you're trying to fix yourself, and you have the potential to overthink it.
Mhm.
It's just it's a more significant problem, but the hitting is about to become a problem if they don't figure it out.
I think so too.
It's about to become a big problem. So.
And we'll talk about kind of this weekend in just a minute. But before we do that, I kind of want to dive into some stats that I've put together for this weekend. So I'll give a quick rundown about everything I'm going to tell you, and then I'm going to tell you, and then I just kind of want you to chew on it and respond to it,
Okay.
whatever thoughts it brings up. So,
All right.
For you and the listeners, so I've put together. This is a list of every Sunday game. So this is only Sunday games, and this is for every Sunday game against a non-conference opponent before SEC play starts in the Tony Vitello era, and then obviously in the 1 year of Josh Elander's time as head coach.
All right, I'm intrigued.
So on Sunday non-conference games prior to the SEC play.
Got it.
In 2018, Tony Vitello's team scored a total of 17 runs in those games. Their opponent scored 10 in 2018. So 17 to 10 would be your cumulative score for those 3 Sunday games in that season.
Got it.
2019, 15 to 3. Tennessee outscored their opponents 15 to 13. That's a big difference.
Okay.
15 to 13. Now that is the closest grouping that the closest spread you'll see out of all of this. So keep that in mind.
Got it.
In 2020, Tennessee outscored opponents on Sundays 36 to 10. In 2021, Tennessee outscored those opponents in the same scenario 23 to 6. 2022, 38 to 5. 2023, 29 to 12. 2024, 36 to 9. Last year, 37 to 4. And then this year, so far, well, I'm going to save it. So in the Tony Vitello era, all of that put together, right? We're taking all the Sunday games against non-conference opponents prior to SEC play. Tennessee scored a total in Tony Vitello's coaching career, 231 runs total. They gave up 69 runs total. So that's 231 to 69 would be your cumulative scores for all those seasons, all those games.
Got it.
That means that the average runs for per game under Tony Vitello in these types of situations would be 24.6. So Tennessee averaged in a game 24.6 runs in these types of games.
Good grief.
For the seasons, like in each individual season, like by season, Tennessee averaged 28.9 runs per game. So obviously a little higher there. Runs against in each individual game broken down, the average would be 2.9 runs per game. So taking the average score in any given Sunday game against a non-conference opponent under Tony Vitello on a Sunday, you would have beaten a team, if you round, 25 to 3. That would have been your final score with Tony Vitello. For the season runs against, our opponents averaged 8.6 runs. So comparing that to the season average for Tennessee, 28.9, 8.6, the final score there on average in any given season would have been 29 to 9. Okay, so obviously clearly dominant in both of those scenarios. So your average margin of victory, just kind of round this up, under Tony Vitello, for an individual game in this situation Average margin of victory, 21.7 runs. So 22 runs is your average margin of victory.
That's a football score.
Football score. By season, so your average difference for a whole season under Tony Vitello in those types of games, 20.3. So 20 runs would be your average margin of victory against opponents on a Sunday. Okay. Now, the reason I focus, before we get into Elander, the reason I focus on Sundays is because obviously we saw Tennessee struggle against Wright State on Sunday. They've struggled at the plate, generally speaking. But Sundays, and this isn't news to you, Nick, but to our listeners it might be, Sundays are supposed to be the day, especially when you're playing a lesser opponent, a non-conference opponent that's not in the SEC, that their pitching is thin.
Yep.
It often is a bullpen game for a lot of teams because they don't have a strong third arm. So that game should be a game where you are scoring a lot of runs.
Yep.
Now, you may also be giving up a lot of runs. Now, obviously, you look at the stats, Tennessee wasn't, but you might also be giving up a lot of runs, but it shouldn't matter because you should be scoring a lot of runs, right? Under Josh Elander, this is just 2026, so a lot smaller sample size.
God, this is going to be bad.
You have 3 final scores.
Yeah.
Okay. You have the first Sunday final score, which was 12-2. Then Tennessee lost their second Sunday game series, 5-9. That was against Kent State. And then you lost this past Sunday, 0-6 against Wright State. So when you look at those numbers, runs for in those games, Tennessee scored 17 runs. Runs against in all those games combined, Tennessee gave up 17 runs. So do the math there. At margin of victory, non-existent.
None.
0.
Doesn't exist.
No margin of victory at all because Tennessee allowed their opponents on Sundays to score as many runs as they scored. The average runs for would have been 5.7. That's the same for runs against, obviously, because it's the same number. And obviously the season numbers don't matter because Josh Elander's only coached one season. So I say all this to say, I understand it's 1 year. I get it. Josh Elander in year one has had a worse year on Sundays than any time Tony Vitello was on campus. I think that this team is lacking some sort of discipline to score runs in a game that you should score a lot of runs in. And then also you could say a game that doesn't necessarily matter, right? The first weekend series was against Nicholls State. Didn't matter. You already won the first 2. This weekend against Wright State didn't matter. You already won the first 2. Now, obviously, every game matters. You know, you want to win them all.
Sure.
The Kent State game was a rubber match, and you lost that one. So I come away with this thinking. Well, actually, let me kick it to you before I tell you what I'm thinking. When you hear all those numbers, what do you hear? What do you think?
I hear that we have a hitting problem. I hear that we don't know how to score runs against inferior pitching.
Mm-hmm.
And this is a side tangent, so maybe we can come back to it. But I also think about the factor. This would be interesting. We'd have to parse through this a bit, but I was listening to VolQuest earlier today on the way home, and they were actually talking about the fact that there seems to be a lot more parity this year than has existed in the past. And they're not, obviously we don't have a big enough body of work yet to probably understand why that is. There's speculation that there's not enough roster spots in college baseball for all the talent. And so the talent's like much more evenly spread than maybe it even is in some of the other sports. And so maybe it is the case that some of these teams have better pitching than what they've had in the Vitello era. But the last couple of years of Vitello, we also had NIL. And so I don't think that that's a pass. I just say, let me assume that that's true. I still just don't think that's a pass. You still should just be better. You still should just be winning these games. It's pretty, I don't know. That's a black pill.
It is. And I was worried that it would get us feeling a little too down. So let me say, to expand on what you're saying more, I do agree. And I listened to the same VolQuest episode, and I guess they were talking about roster size. So now there's like a rule on how big your roster can be, but it's not the same rule for every team. Is that how you understood it as well? Yeah,
there's some kind of loophole that's going to exist for a while for the freshmen for reasons that I didn't quite fully understand.
Right. So they said Tennessee has 34 players, I guess, on their roster, right? And that's not the same for every team.
Yeah, like some teams have like 39.
Right,
Yeah.
right. So, to your point, I think that that could matter more than we know, more than we will know. But like you already said, it doesn't give him a pass. And so I think when I sat down and did this, I was shocked, frankly, that not only it's not like oh yeah, we're scoring less runs, we're giving up a little more, but like in the aggregate, you didn't beat anybody
Right.
really.
Right.
Like you came away with the 17-17 game, through
Well,
all these.
and didn't 15 of those come from one game?
12 of them came
12 of
came from
them.
one game. Yeah,
Yeah.
so majority of them came from one game,
Yeah. I
right?
mean,
More than
they didn't
majority.
score any this
None
Sunday.
against
None.
Wright State.
Zero
Right.
against Wright State.
And I get it. Like Wright State is a good program for the level that they play. I get it. Tennessee found a way to make it to Omaha in 2021 by beating Wright State in the region. Like I understand they're not a bad program. I'm not trying to sit here and say they are, but you're Tennessee. You're national champions 2 years ago, and I get like we have a new coach. But like I guess I just don't. I'm not okay with saying Josh Elander's been here for a while. He's been the hitting coach for as long as Tony V has
As
been
long
here.
as Tony's been there. Yep.
Yeah, and then now it's like, so you can say that, but it's like, but the team's going to take a step back, or is not going to be as good with the change. Like both things can't be true, I don't think.
And if they are going to take a step back, shouldn't it be because Frank Anderson left and it should be pitching? Like
You would think so.
it seems like the hitting should be the thing that's most consistent, and he's clearly frustrated with it. So I think he recognizes it. And I'd like to think that he's a good enough coach that he can help them correct that.
Mm-hmm.
And who knows, like locker room things, like maybe there's immaturity, like I don't know, things we don't know. I think that we still lack a clear leader on the team. We've talked about that a few times. So I don't know. And there have been signs of various guys hitting the ball well at again, like one game here, one game there. Like Grimmer hit the ball well. I talked about him last week. He hit the ball well in that first game against ETSU in that midweek game, but then dude can't hit it with a boat paddle since that first night.
Mm-hmm.
And so I don't know what that is, but they just can't put it together. Like Henry Ford is the only one that consistently hits the ball.
Yep.
Like everybody else just has spurts. Like Newstrom has had spurts. Jay keeps getting on base, but like he's not really hitting the ball. And Garrett Wright kind of gave you a spark, but he's not been consistent. So I don't know. It's like they just can't put it all together. They can't all hit the ball on the same night, and I don't know what that is.
Yeah, so I think my biggest takeaway, though, like if you ask me, gun to my head right now, what does this mean for the long term for this season? What I think it means is that this team lacks the it factor that it takes to have in baseball to produce runs when you need them. This team does not have the ability to, when their back's against the wall, when they need to win a game, to get the hits, to get the base runners, to hit them in when they're in scoring position. This team lacks it across the board in Sunday games. Clearly, that's all I broke down. And obviously, as you get into SEC play, I think we all know there's going to be a good handful, probably, especially based on what we've seen from this team, of rubber matches on Sundays. I definitely see Tennessee winning a lot of Friday nights whenever
Coons.
Why am I blanking on? Yes, thank you. Whenever Teagan's on the mound, I see Tennessee winning a lot of Friday nights. But I don't know what that, is Landon Mack going to be great on Saturday? I don't know. Can we hit to keep up with teams? I don't know. But Sunday, it feels like you're going to win Fridays. You might lose Saturdays, and then Sundays are going to be important. And then obviously in SEC play, Sundays matter even if you win the first two, because every game is another number in the win column. And that just helps you when it comes to seeding, when it comes to your record and how you get, do you get to host a regional or not? All these games matter. And so I'm really concerned with this team's ability to be able to score runs when you need them in games that are going to have a ton of weight to them. And so right now, I do not think that this team is going to find a way to get out of this funk. I think that we might just be looking at the team that we have, and this is just what they're going to be. Yeah. And to your point, I do want to say, I think the thing that makes Henry Ford so special on this team right now is not just his consistency at the plate, but it's his consistency at the plate with runners in scoring position.
Correct.
He is hitting the ball really, really well when there's guys in a position to score, and it does not feel like a single person on that team is capable of doing that when we need it. And that's hard as a Tennessee fan, because the last
Oh,
3 years at least, maybe
you
more.
just felt like whoever's up is going to get the big hit.
Exactly.
Yeah.
It could be our eight hitter, our seven hitter. It didn't matter. I mean, you had the World Series MVP hitting in the 5 hole in the year that we won the World Series.
Yep.
And so I'm like, those teams were so deep and had so many guys who just were able to get hits in the clutch when you needed it. And this team feels like it only has one.
I mean, I
And
remember. I mean, Luke Lipsius was probably one of the maybe not worst hitters, but like he just wasn't on the caliber that a lot of the other guys on his teams were.
mm-hmm.
And when Luke got up, I just felt like, oh, he's going to get a hit. Like
Yep.
they just had a vibe. They had, I don't know, confidence at the plate. They had an approach. They had that dog in them, however you want to say it. And like these boys ain't got it so far. And
No, no.
and we're what are we 16 games in? Are we
Yeah.
12-4?
Yes, that sounds right. Something like that. Yeah.
Yeah. So that's a lot of baseball for
Yep.
to have not figured it out. I mean,
For sure. Right. And again, before we kind of move on,
and we're about
to
to go to
me,
Athens.
right. The thing why this I think is disturbing me so much is because it seems like you're struggling on Sundays. I just don't know how to compute that. Like Sundays are the day that you shouldn't be struggling. Like, okay,
Right.
you don't hit well on Friday night. Yeah, you're facing the other team's ace. Okay. But like you're struggling to hit on Sundays whenever
Yep.
you should be able to string hits together and
Yep.
get into a bullpen quick, and it shouldn't be a big deal. And the guy against Wright State, it wasn't their starter, but the guy, he went like 4 or 5 innings, I think, from like the second to the sixth or the third to the seventh or something like that. He pitched a good chunk of innings for them, and this is a Sunday bullpen guy, and we couldn't hit him.
Couldn't hit him.
And I'm just like, I don't care who Wright State throws out there. You should be able to hit any guy they put on the mound.
Yep.
Any guy.
And like, there's part of me that's like, maybe this team's so immature that once they win 2 games and they win the series, they're kind of mentally packing it in.
Right.
But like, you should be so much better that like you should be able to mentally. It's kind of like when you have a good team in football that like, okay, they didn't show up mentally. Like, think about the blue bloods in football. Like,
Yeah, like Georgia.
how many? Well, I was thinking Ohio State in the Big Ten.
Sure.
Like, how many times are they playing a far inferior opponent? It's the end of the third quarter, and Ohio State's down 10-7, or it's 14-10 or something like that, and they're like, oh yeah, I guess we better screw our heads on straight. And they turn it on the fourth quarter and they score 3 or 4 touchdowns and they end up winning huge. Like, there should be a similar mechanism here where it's like, okay, you're down 3-1 or 2-0, and it's the fourth inning, and somebody's got to walk down through the dugout and be like, hey, we better get our heads out of our butts because we need to win a baseball game today. And then guys go up there and get on base and knock some runs in. And whatever that switch is, they just don't have it.
Yep. Yep. No, I agree. Well, let's go ahead and go to the Tennessee Tech game. So last night, Tennessee played Tennessee Tech, and we won that game 20-2. So this was your first 20-run game of the season,
Yep.
which, obviously that's a ton of runs in baseball. But like under Tony Vitello, you kind of got conditioned to like, if
That's
we're
what
playing
we-
a bad team,
Yeah,
you're
that's
going
what
to
we
score
did.
15 plus. Like it seemed like second nature. But did this game, Nick, unlock any? We just talked a lot about the weekend, kind of hard on the offense. Did
Yeah.
this game help you feel more confident about the offense at all? Or was it just, it's a midweek game, so write it off? Like, what'd you think about that?
It does make me feel better in a few aspects. One, that thing we were just talking about, where like I think it can even be easy to roll into a midweek game and think like, it's Tennessee Tech, or it's whoever inferior opponent, and not have your head screwed on straight. And like, who hit the grand slam in the bottom of the first?
Reese Chapman.
Like, it felt like that game was over right in that moment. And it was, but they didn't quit. They kept hitting. And so it did make me feel a little bit better. It doesn't make me feel better like, oh, now I think we'll go win 2 out of 3 against Georgia, but it made me feel like it could be something to build on, that maybe Elander, I mean, he was really upset after the Sunday game. And so it made me think maybe he has the ability to get it out of him when he's raw,
Right.
And so I don't think we're going to go, cards on the table. I don't think we're going to beat Georgia. Maybe we win one, but I don't think we're going to win that series. But it makes me feel like maybe he is a better coach than what the first, few weeks have led us to believe. Maybe he can get it out of him. So, but TTU's a pretty good, I mean, you and I both know we live in Middle Tennessee. Like TTU's a pretty good club year in and year out for their level.
Mm-hmm.
But it's just kind of hard to know with like an OVC team year to year. Like, what if Tennessee Tech's just horrible this year? And you look, so it could be that. Like, I could be saying this makes me feel better. I could be looking back in a month and being like, oh, Tech has only won 4 games in the last
Mm-hmm.
month,
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yeah, I guess I agree. I don't want to be I don't want to write off the fact that we scored 20 runs and say that doesn't matter at all
Yeah,
because I've been begging them, wanting them to just pour it on somebody, and they did that. So
yeah,
like we run ruled the team, like that's great. I was happy with the game. Obviously, I was happy with how we played. So I don't want to minimize that at all. But obviously, like what you're saying, I just need them to prove it to me that they
yep,
can do it against the
yeah.
SEC team.
It's not enough. Yeah,
Right. It's just not enough for me to change my opinion, but it does help me think like, well, maybe this team can figure it out. I think the possibilities there. And if Tennessee lost on Sunday to Wright State and then would have played, even if they won, if they would have won, let's say 5-3 against Tech, I would be having a much different feeling right now
yeah.
than I would have because they won 20-2.
I,
So I am
I
a
think
little
if I could
more
describe it, it like keeps the hope alive.
right. Exactly.
Like it
Exactly.
keeps the hope alive that it's there and that
Hmm.
it can be unlocked. Whereas like if they win that game 5-3, you're kind of like, okay, I feel pretty hopeless that like this
Yeah.
team will ever be able to score a bunch of runs.
Exactly, exactly. So, and obviously, like in SEC play, I don't expect this team this year, based on what I've seen, to beat SEC teams in a run rule. Now, Tony Vitello, he could do that.
Sure.
I think about, you're talking about the 21 season. I mean, we played LSU in the Supers at home in 21, and we just absolutely destroyed them. Just killed them. And no one was really expecting that, us included, kind of being the new guys in college baseball that are good. Um, but I just don't think this team, even at their best, is going to be capable of beating teams like they did that year. And I don't think that's necessarily an indictment on Josh Elander.
No.
It's very possible that this team would have struggled in a similar ways under Tony Vitello so far this year. But you just can't know for sure until we see them play some SEC games, until we see what kind of coaching effort Elander puts into fixing these problems. So verdict's still out, like you're saying, but I would definitely say my expectations have dropped significantly since the season started, but the hope, like you said, the hope or the possibility of them still succeeding is still there. So.
Yep. Yep.
So getting into this upcoming weekend, so Tennessee plays their first SEC series this weekend. It's in Athens at Georgia. UGA and Tennessee have two common opponents, which I thought this was interesting. So Georgia has also played Wright State in their opening weekend this year, and they also played Oakland
Yep.
in a weekend. So they've played two common opponents. UGA won the series against Wright State. They did it more, convincingly in games 1 and 2 than Tennessee did, but they also dropped game 3 to Wright State, which I did so I put together the Sunday stats before I looked back and looked at and previewed Georgia. And so when I saw that Georgia had lost to Wright State on Sunday, that did do something for me mentally. I'm like, well, okay, well, maybe Wright State just has like an up and coming guy that they don't trust on a Friday and Saturday, but he is actually maybe even better than one of those guys, but he just hasn't proved it consistently yet. And
Sure.
so maybe he just had a really good showing against Georgia, a really good showing against Tennessee, and that's why those two teams dropped the Sunday game. Maybe that's what it is. So that did change something, I think, but again, you still need to see it. And then against Oakland, Georgia actually played them in 4 games. They had a 4-game series, and Georgia won every game with a cumulative score. All 4 games, the final was 48-9. So they destroyed Oakland. Now the fourth game they played, they only won 4-3. So it was a close game. But so kind of thinking about that, thinking about Georgia's season so far, you've already kind of said you expect Tennessee to drop 2 at least.
Yep.
Do you have anything to add to that?
I just think Georgia's bats are way ahead of ours. I mean, from what I've what little research I've done on Georgia, it seems like those boys are mashing the ball
Yeah.
pretty early in the season. And the way you stay in it is your pitching, right? Like, can Coons hold them down? Like, I don't know. We've not seen Coons really have to pitch against, well, I guess he threw against UCLA. So we've seen him, and he held UCLA to 6, I think. So
Mm-hmm.
On a Friday night, if he holds Georgia to 6 through 6 or 7 innings, you'd like to think you're in that game. And so I'd be thrilled to be wrong. It just feels to me like we are not hitting the ball well enough to outscore Georgia 2 games. So
No.
I won't be shocked if we get swept, but I hope we win at least 1 and would love to be wrong and win 2.
Yeah. So my prediction is the same as yours. I actually I think that Tennessee's going to win on Friday. I do believe Tennessee's going to win on Friday, but I do think Georgia will take the next 2. And that prediction just comes from, like you've already mentioned, Georgia's is a hitter friendly park, and obviously teams just generally tend to hit better at home. So there's that's in their favor. I think Tegan Coons is a real dude, and I think he's going to pitch well. What you said a minute ago, you'd like to think that Tennessee, if Coons goes 7 and gives up 6, Tennessee's in the spot to win that game. I agree that I would like to think that's true. I'll go ahead and plant my flag and say if Georgia scores 6 off
we'll
Coons, we're going to lose.
Yeah.
So I think Coons needs to have much more of a Herculean effort, and it's going to have to be 2 or 3. So if he gives up 2 or 3 runs through 6 or 7, that's where I see Tennessee winning.
Yeah.
Obviously, less is better, but
winning a game 4-3, 5-4.
Right. That's where I think
eking out some runs.
Exactly. Yeah. That's where I see Tennessee winning on Friday night. And I don't really see a path to victory on Saturday or Sunday based on all the factors of our hitting and the fact that Georgia is a good hitting team. I think that Tennessee should be able to compete at the plate against Georgia. I don't think Georgia's pitching is as strong as many other SEC teams that we're going to play, but I don't trust us at the plate, and I don't think that we're going to do what it takes to win on Saturday, and I don't think we're going to do what it takes on Sunday.
They do have better pitching than we've seen so far, though, right?
Oh, definitely.
And we ain't been hitting it so far. So.
No, absolutely. So, yeah, I think we're kind of similar there on what we expect. That kind of puts our prediction out there as well. So, I guess let's go ahead and get a hard and fast one from you. Which game does Tennessee win, if any?
Yeah, if they win any, it'll be Friday night. I mean, I agree with you. I think that Coons is their best chance to win.
Will they win?
No, I think they get swept.
Okay. You heard it here first, listener. Nick says we're going to get swept.
God, I hope I'm wrong. Listener, I'd love to come back next week and just eat a whole big old bowl of hot, steamy crow.
Oh, me. Yeah, it would be awesome to flip the script and Tennessee sweeps. That'd be great.
But, that'd be amazing.
I will come on here and eat a literal crow if that happens.
Yeah.
So, I won't even figuratively do it. I will boil a crow and just eat it.
We will trap ravens.
Oh, me. But I did want to note for the listener and for us, Saturday's game against Georgia is going to be our first game kind of on normal TV is what I kind of wrote because we obviously did play on TV in the Texas series, but it was on Flow Sports, so you had to have a subscription there. It's really stupid. And then obviously they've been playing on the ESPN Plus channels or SC Network Plus technically. But this is our first game. It's going to be on SEC Network, 5 p.m. Central Time. So be sure to catch that game if you haven't seen Tennessee play yet this year.
Yeah, my man John Wilkerson's carried me through the season so far. And,
exactly.
He's a good one to listen to. He calls a good ball game.
The best in the business.
Calls a great ball game, and you always got wheels for some visual highlights later on.
Exactly. Absolutely. All right. Well, that pretty much wraps up baseball talk. Let's get into this fun topic we have saved for the end tonight, which is toughest places to play. So we're going to do the VOLatile podcast edition of toughest places to play. And then I'm going to give you what Josh Pate said was his top 10. We're only going to do 5. We'll kind of see.
We haven't been to enough to be doing
right, not yet. And so we'll kind of see, how we align, where we differ, and then we'll kind of critique Josh if we have any critiques. So this, just for the listener, we're going to rank these. These are only venues that we have been to. So there has to be a place that we can actually evaluate with our own eyes. And we are going to rank them from like easiest to hardest, but obviously there's a top five, so they're all probably pretty difficult in their own way. Now, Nick, I know you have some that that might have made your top five that you would say aren't actually tough to play in,
Yeah, yeah,
but
yeah.
that might still be in the five anyways.
Yeah.
But again, these are only schools we've been to, and we're not going to include Neyland Stadium as I already kind of led with in the show. Josh Pate had that ranked number one, toughest place to play. We both agree that he got that right. We would also have Neyland Stadium as toughest place to play. So we kind of left that one off just for the sake of the conversation. But Nick, why don't you go ahead and do your top five?
Yep. So this is of places I've been, like you said. So hopefully, Lord willing, once I have a greater body of work, I think a few of these are going to drop off of top five list. But of the places I've been, number five, the mighty Kroger Field in Lexington, Kentucky. Listener, I'm not going to lie, that is not a rowdy environment. That is, I went into that ball game and I sat in the stadium. And Joe was there with me. Joe's not here to confirm this, but Joe was there with me. And I kid you not, they had horse racing on the Jumbotron leading up
Only
to
in
the game.
Kentucky. Only in
And I was
Kentucky. You
like,
can't make that up.
what is happening right now? Like, it's just a terrible vibe for a football stadium. But they're all watching it and they're into it and they're cheering. And I'm like, this is the weirdest thing I've ever seen in my life. What a bunch of backwards. Good grief.
Oh man! At least it wasn't like a basketball game. At least they weren't showing like
Yeah.
highlights from the spring. You
Right.
know,
They got like Jody
man.
Meeks highlights going on up there. Yeah.
Hilarious. But I will say though, Kroger Field apparently is a really tough
Or
to
sorry,
play.
this is John Wall. Is that right?
John Wall, yeah, John
Yeah,
Wall.
not Jody Meeks, but he also
But
played there.
Kroger Field is apparently a really tough place to play if you're the Georgia Bulldogs, because apparently they just can never play well when they go to Kroger Field. I have no idea why, but
It's wild. It's the most vanilla thing in the world. Like, good grief. Number four, I will say this wrong, but is it Farrot Field where Missouri?
I don't know.
I think it's Farrot Field,
Okay.
Faurot. That's the name of their stadium. It's a very forgettable name. Decent environment, exponentially better than Kroger Field. I will say the Kentucky game was a day game. The Missouri game was a night game. So that in and of itself is
As Tennessee fans, we do not give passes for the time of day the game occurs. That's like the LSU argument. LSU can never be the toughest place to play because they don't show up during the day. You automatically lose some points for that.
okay. I'm sorry. I apologize. It was like 3 degrees that day. It wasn't quite that cold, but it was like single digits. It was like high single digits. It was very cold. And so the pregame environment was zero, like no one was out. But the stadium filled up fast, and they were loud. And that was a Jawan Jennings game. I mean, Jawan Jennings beat them boys basically by himself.
That
And,
Derek Garantano was the quarterback, right? That was
that's
his
right.
really good game. Okay.
Yep. That was his one really good game. Yep, my guy JG. And that was that was just a much better environment than Kentucky, and that's about all I can say about it. It was fun. They had a pretty good student section. They were pretty rowdy. So 3 is Donald W. Reynolds Razorback Stadium. That would be number 3. Arkansas fans, Arkansas, I don't know, man. The pig suey is super weird. It's
the
not,
calling the hogs is it's
calling
gay.
the hogs.
Let's call it what it is. It's gay.
It is not good. It is not good, listener. It's not intimidating.
It's laughable.
But for some reason, our boys struggle in that stadium, and have multiple times. Like, it wasn't just when we went a couple years ago. Like, they have struggled there traditionally. So, so I put Razorback Stadium number 3. I got Davis Wade Stadium number 2. Got the Cowbells overtime game there last year. Everyone was really jacked up for that game. And that honestly was just a much more, I would have thought that Arkansas would have been a rowdier environment than Mississippi State. So that's probably the biggest surprise for me of like my preconceived notions about these places. I think I would have thought that Missouri was a tougher place to play than Kentucky. I think I would have thought that Arkansas would have been a tougher place to play than Mississippi State. And even though we beat Mississippi State and lost to Arkansas, the Mississippi State environment was much rowdier.
Yes.
And then number one, I don't think I saw it on its best day, but Ben Hill Griffin Stadium, hatingly known as the Swamp.
Mm-hmm.
It's no Neyland Stadium, but when ETN breaks off a long one, it gets pretty loud. So
Yeah, yeah. Well, I think it's a solid list. I'll go ahead and do mine, and then we'll kind of compare notes here. So, start with number 5. I have Texas Memorial Stadium, which is where the Longhorns play. I saw them play there. This would have been probably maybe 2014 or 2015. It's been a while. I saw them play West Virginia, and that is an underwhelming opponent if you're thinking of that in 2026. But back then, West Virginia was still a pretty good team.
yeah,
And it was pretty good environment. They have a lot of unique traditions, and so I enjoyed getting to watch a game there. I went with a buddy whose parents are season ticket holders, and it was a good environment. Definitely not an SEC environment, even though they are in the SEC now. Texas seems to have a lot of, wealthy boosters, kind of old money type vibe, and so it didn't get as rowdy as SEC schools do. But it was a good stadium nonetheless, and definitely better than the only one I left off my list. So full cards on the table. I've only been to 6 stadiums that aren't Neyland, and the only one I left off was I guess it's technically called Acrisure Stadium now, which is where the Pitt Panthers play and the Pittsburgh Steelers more
yeah,
famously.
that's right.
And Pitt was a joke of an environment, and so that got left off the list. But at 5, I had Texas Memorial. Number 4, similar to you, because we both made this trip, I have Razorback Stadium. And so, yeah, I think you touched on that well. I will say that calling the Hogs aside, which is kind of their most known tradition, their fans did seem engaged, loud. They generally kind of understood their role as a fan in the stadium. And so I thought Razorback Stadium was a tough place to play. Kind of similar to you, though. I definitely foresee that be getting knocked down my list pretty quickly as I go to more stadiums. But for now, it sits there. And if I had to look at it through specifically a Tennessee lens, I would say that it's probably in my top 5 even after I go to all the SEC stadiums because of how bad, like you already said, Tennessee always plays there.
Yep.
So clearly there's something about that place that Tennessee doesn't like. But going from more general college football standpoint, it comes in at 4 for me. 3, similar to you, I had Davis Wade. So I also had it above Arkansas. Davis Wade, where Mississippi State plays, was definitely louder. Even I would say obviously the Cowboys make it louder, but even the fans yelling and things,
they were just generally rowdier.
Right, more passionate, more rowdy. I think we both would say we really enjoyed going to that game. It's been the best stadium experience. Again, not toughest place to play, but best stadium experience that we've experienced so far. Going to an SEC game on the road. So yeah, I definitely left that one feeling like, yeah, this is a underrated location to watch a football game. Number 2 for me, and this is one that I don't think you've been to, which is why it's not on your list, is Bryant-Denny Stadium. So Bryant-Denny, where Bama plays, is a tough environment. I've actually seen 3 games there. So I saw Tennessee play Bama there in 2014, maybe 13. I can't remember the exact year, but what I do remember for sure is that the game that I saw Tennessee play in Bryant-Denny was Josh Dobbs' first appearance on the Tennessee Volunteers.
Yeah, and he played pretty decent.
He did play pretty good. He didn't start that game,
right?
But he came in later, and he kind of gave us some
gave
juice
him a spark,
and,
as they say.
Yeah, I mean, it gave him a spark down like 3 touchdowns or 4 touchdowns or whatever it was.
It was out of hand, yeah.
But yeah, but I also saw, and this is why this game or why this stadium is 2 for me, is because I saw Bama play LSU there in the same year. So I went to 2 games, and that game was pretty wild. And that gave me more respect at that point in time than I'd had for Bama as a fan base. The game against Tennessee, they didn't even seem to really care. But the game where they played LSU, it was pretty rowdy there. Again, wasn't Neyland Stadium. Bama had never seen an environment like Neyland in 2022. But yeah, it was a good place to see a game, and I definitely recommend it to fans. If you're if your team's ever playing at Bryant Denny, it's definitely worth the trip. It's a real unique college town. It's got a really cool vibe. So definitely recommend it. But number one for me, same as yours, is Ben Hill Griffin Stadium. I think the Swamp, when Florida is good and when they're at their best, and I think obviously the night game always gives the fans a boost, but I don't think it gives you a pass.
Yep.
But seeing Florida play, the fans were into it. I mean, we saw them play Tennessee in 23, and that was a tough game for us, and it was real loud whenever Joe Milton hit Squirrel White down the sideline to score the first touchdown, and it was even louder when Trevor, I think Trevor Etienne busted that big long run. So yeah, I think the Swamp is a really respectable place to see a game. Really rowdy, tough environment. But the thing that's different about the Swamp, and I do want to plug this, the thing that's different about the Swamp compared to Tennessee is that Florida fans have to have a good team to be the type of
Yep.
of top five, top three, wherever you rank them. They have to be a good team with a good product on the field for them to get there. That's the thing that
They do
separates
not
Tennessee from
bring
them.
it unless they're good.
No, Tennessee brings it no matter what,
Every
and
week.
that's what makes Neyland Stadium the best stadium in all of college football. So, good list, Nick. I thought that was fun. We'll go ahead and touch on Josh Pate's top 10. So, I'll run through these quickly. So, at 10, Pate had Sanford Stadium, which is home of the Georgia Bulldogs. At 9, he had Bryant Denny, Bama's home field. Kyle Field was at 8, Texas A&M. At 7 was Jordan-Hare Stadium, which is where Auburn plays. At 6, he had Husky Stadium, where Washington plays. Number 5, he had Ben Hill Griffin Stadium, Florida. Number 4, he had Autzen Stadium, Oregon. Number 3, he had Beaver Stadium, Penn State. At 2, he had LSU, Tiger Stadium. And then at 1, as we've already touched on, Neyland Stadium, UT. So these were all graded on a scale. This is what Josh Pate said. These were all graded on a scale of you're assuming that this stadium is at its best environment. So, quick,
Sure.
easy example, Penn State, he graded this on the whiteout game, right? So,
Yes.
on the whiteout game,
Yes.
Penn State was the third best stadium. LSU, a night game, probably against someone like Bama or Florida, LSU was the second best stadium.
Yep.
Tennessee, 2022, October 15th against Bama, Neyland Stadium was, by far the best stadium. So that was the kind of the scale that he graded on. So, Nick, do you agree with his top 10? Do you not agree? And then second question would be, what stood out to you? What surprised you?
Yeah. Well, let me actually, it's a little embarrassing to do this live, but I think I got locked into thinking about just all the SEC stadiums that I've been to.
Sure.
And I will say I did go to the playoff game where Tennessee played Ohio State at Ohio Stadium.
Yeah, so I'm glad you bring that up because I was surprised it wasn't on your list.
And that's what made me think of it. I was surprised that Ohio Stadium isn't on Pate's list. And again, I've not been to all these places. So I think that's just me watching a lot of college football on TV and assuming Ohio State's a blue blood. And why wouldn't they be one of the craziest?
I want to hear, though, now that you're thinking about it like that, how would you change your list? Where would the shoe fall on your list?
I would have put them number 2. I should have put them number 2, which just knocks everybody down. One, it knocks Kentucky off of my top 5. And it was not as loud or as rowdy as Ben Hill Griffin. I felt the very same way though, like about Florida. Like those fans went into that game very nervous. Like obviously they shouldn't have been because they murdered everybody in the playoff, but they had just lost to Michigan and they were like, all the fans around us were literally like wanting to fire Ryan Day, like going into that game. And so they did not get into it until they got up a few scores. And so it's kind of like it felt from my one experience there a little bit like Florida in that it was like, this is clearly a fair weather fan base. Like they're not going to get loud until their team shows them something. Whereas Neyland is loud from the first snap, from the opening kickoff. And so I would put it number 2. I mean, it was louder and rowdier when it was at its peak than any of the other SEC stadiums I've been to other than Florida. So that's where I would put it. And I'll parlay that into this Pate list by saying I was kind of shocked that it wasn't on there. I guess another thing I was kind of shocked is that Penn State was so high. I've never been there, but I think that's just an SEC guy, not a lot of respect for Big Ten football. I guess I would have thought that Michigan or Ohio State would have been higher on this list. I know some people that have been to the Big House who say like it's pretty crazy. Um, and then I guess I would have thought Georgia would have been a bit higher.
Mm-hmm.
I think I would have thought they would have been in the top 5. And then Pacific Northwest football just generally seems like a joke as someone who lives in the Southeast. So I guess just kind of shocking to see Oregon and Husky Stadium on there. So those are just kind of some of my general thoughts. I know it's not an all SEC list when it comes to best ones in the stadium,
Mm-hmm.
but it's interesting for someone who has broad knowledge of all those stadiums to try to give an objective view of where they would fit in. And I guess I was a little shocked to see some of those as high as they were. I would just never think that like a game at Oregon is rowdier than a game in Athens,
Mm-hmm.
So
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Yeah, that was surprising to me too. I think obviously the one that stood out the most is Husky Stadium being where Washington plays. Now, Pate is super adamant, if anyone listens to him, that it is a incredible place to see a game, and it's louder than you would. I think what he kind of describes is like you kind of go into it with a certain expectation and it just blows that expectation away. And so it has kind of a shock value that you're not expecting because Washington just isn't, considered as great of a program as most SEC schools,
yeah,
obviously most Big Ten schools. Now, obviously, Washington is in the Big Ten, so is Oregon. So he did have 3 Big Ten teams technically in the top 10, but it's funny, like that's his list, right? It's 7 SEC schools and 3 Big Ten schools
yeah,
now. But
yeah,
traditionally, if you look traditionally, it's so that excludes Texas A&M. You have 6 traditional SEC schools,
right.
and you have 1 traditional Big Ten school, and that's it. And so, to
And
your
two, and
point,
the other 2 would
be
be
Pac whatever, yeah.
They'd be Pac-10, and then A&M would have been old Big 12.
All Big 12, exactly.
Yeah,
So I was surprised at Husky Stadium, but I listen to Pate quite a bit, and so I've heard him talk about this before. That it's actually a really a hostile environment, and you're not expecting it. I am not to kind of argue with you here. I was not surprised to see Michigan, Ohio State not on the list
yeah,
because I just think of those programs as complacent when it comes to fans and the in-game experience. I think that they don't have that desperate need to put their soul into the outcome of the game
sure.
from the fan perspective.
Yeah,
And so, when I go to a Tennessee game, I literally am thinking about my role in the stadium
yeah.
as if I'm on the
I
team.
can help
You
my
know,
team win this football game.
exactly,
Yeah,
exactly. And I don't think that's true of Ohio State or Michigan fans at
yeah,
all.
sure.
Um, and so,
I
but I
think the
think
only thing for me, I think it was Michigan more than Ohio State because I've just heard other reviews from people who've been there who have talked about how big and overwhelming it is, and like probably their reviews were more about just like the experience of it,
sure.
kind of being a spectacle more than like
Sure.
how rowdy the fans are, though.
Yeah, and all credit, like Michigan is a place that I want to see a game really bad just because of the tradition and the pageantry. And Michigan, obviously, as much as I hate them, is a traditional
Yep, they're blue blood.
blue blood. Like
Yep.
they are just that would be a fantastic place to see a game. But I just again, I don't think that their fans bring the same sort of. I mean, the SEC slogan, right? It just means more like there's just something about
Yeah,
seeing a college football game in the South that is unlike anywhere else. And I think Pate would agree with that because he has 7 of those teams in the top 10.
yeah,
And, the first 2 are both SEC schools, traditional SEC schools, and then Penn State's at 3. Everyone says Penn State Whiteout is the best college football game that you can go to. That's kind
yeah,
of the general consensus nationwide.
yeah,
Obviously, I don't think that's true personally, but I would be hard pressed to put it much lower than 3. I think if I
yeah,
had been there.
yeah, yeah. I will say, I think one thing that surprised me, it feels to me like in a lot of these conversations that it's kind of a foregone conclusion that Death Valley is like the craziest place to play. And so just the fact that we were ranked ahead of LSU on that list it made me want to pound my chest a little bit because
Absolutely.
I've never been there, but
Mm-mm.
like most of these conversations go that way. It's like, yeah,
Mm-hmm.
Neyland's pretty good, but like Death Valley is the hardest place to play in college football. And so
Right.
when Josh Pate ranked us ahead of it, that that honestly kind of surprised me, and it made me. I mean, I kind of swelled up a little bit. So
Yeah, he's. I mean, I yeah. I mean, but I mean, I've not been there either. But we touched on this at the beginning, but I just don't have my respect for an environment is automatically diminished, even if it's slightly, if you're telling me that the time of day the game occurs impacts your level of commitment to being a fan of the stadium.
yeah,
I have no respect for that whatsoever. It shouldn't matter.
how
Like,
many 12 o'clock games have we showed up for, and it's a 90 freaking degrees. It's
exactly.
middle of September, and we're out there in the baking sun, and we are just. I'm like, I got to have someone go get me some water. I'm going to be dehydrated because I'm yelling so
Exactly.
much. Like,
Exactly. Yeah, it doesn't matter if kickoff's at 11 or if it's at 7, my voice is going to be gone at
yep,
the end of it.
yep.
And so
I'm gonna be singing bass at church the next day.
yeah,
So
that's right. Exactly. Exactly. So we kind of already touched on, yeah, who surprised you, whatever. Yeah, anything. I think so. Going back to Sanford Stadium, I guess you said that one kind of surprised you. It was so low. I think, and Peyton might have said this. I don't want to quote him, but I think Sanford Stadium is starting to improve on its experience as far as the hostility and the toughness of how it is to play there. I think traditionally it is not a really super tough place to play, but I think in the last since their
since their
phenomenal success,
rise,
and frankly because of Eric Ainge. I mean, Eric Ainge probably deserves like 50% of the credit for Sanford Stadium's experience because he challenged them and then they just made us look like idiots.
yeah,
So um, I do think Sanford Stadium, assuming Georgia continues in success and they can kind of keep the momentum going, I think Sanford Stadium will probably move up on this list. But I don't know how far it can really move. Were you surprised at all by Jordan Hare being at 7?
I think I was. I think I at first it didn't pop to me, but I mean, when I first saw it, yes. But the fact that you had said when each place is at its best,
Mm-hmm.
like I imagine that Jordan Hare on the night of the Iron Bowl is on that particular night the craziest place in the world.
Yeah, probably so.
Like, so to me, that's just the push of that rivalry in my
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
mind. But I guess I'm shocked that he considers that a rowdier place to play than Bryant Denny. But that's probably got something to do with the fact that Auburn's just generally a more hungry fan base than Alabama.
Right, right. I do think that's a big part of it. And I don't when I'm thinking of like elite places to play as far as toughness and rowdiness goes, Auburn doesn't probably crack my top 5. Now, again, this would be me grading school like place I haven't been just on what I hear.
Yeah,
Auburn wouldn't crack my top 5, but I definitely think they're kind of a tier 2
yeah,
school. A tier 1 I think is Tennessee, LSU, Florida, Penn State. Those are kind of the schools that I would think of, but I think Auburn is definitely like a tier two school in that group. I think they're on the same level as Bryant Denny, as Sanford Stadium,
yeah.
as those other
Were you
schools.
kind of shocked to see Oregon in that top tier then?
That's the toughest one for me because I can get behind the idea that Husky Stadium is tougher than you think, right? But Oregon being a team that's like perennially pretty good but has never gotten over the hump,
Makes you
I
think they're probably pretty hungry that they haven't
probably
done
pretty
that.
hungry, but they just have that whole like the Nike, the flashy stuff. It just feels like
That's
they're kind of
awful.
the pretty boy school
Yep,
a little bit,
yep, yep.
And so
They're like a boy in college football program.
I would say the one, if I had to pick one school that I would say this doesn't seem right, I think it would be Oregon. Penn State seems right to me. Husky Stadium I could get behind and understand. Autzen Stadium I would have loved to have gone up there. When did Tennessee play up there? Was that like 2011 or something around there?
When they played at Oregon, yeah, they played a
Yeah,
home and home.
right.
Who was the coach? I guess Derek Dooley.
I think it was Dooley. Yeah, yeah.
Um,
So that would have been 2010 or
yeah,
2011, right?
wasn't Derrick Rogers on that football team?
He probably was. He
Yeah, I
probably
think he
was.
was. I mean, I think we got hammered.
And Derrick transferred to Tech in 2012. So I think 2011 might be
Yeah,
right.
yeah.
And so I would have loved to have made that trip. I was a little bit too young, but I think I would
I
never
was a
be
little
able.
bit too poor.
I will never be able to grade like a stadium like that. I would never be able to grade it based on word of mouth unless I see it for myself.
Yeah,
It's just really hard to believe,
yeah.
So
With the SEC, you have so much cross pollination of fan bases and people
mhm.
talking about it that it's easier. Like it's easy for me to understand that Georgia and A&M are crazy places to play, even though I've never been there. Right? Like I just watch it enough, even on TV, to be like, yeah, Kyle Field seems a little intimidating
Mhm.
until their
Mhm.
male cheerleaders come out. So
So let's go ahead and give our. So we're going to
Bryce Williams, is that?
Bryce Williams. Thank you. We're
Yep.
going to Bryce Williams this fall. Where do you think, if you had to project, it's going to fall on your list?
Yeah. This is again based off of what I've heard. I've heard that it is an underrated, pretty rowdy place to play. So if I'm assuming that Florida's one for me and Ohio Stadium's two, and then there's probably a pretty large gap before I get to Mississippi State, my guess is that it's going to fall into that three slot. But Mississippi State left a great impression, so I won't be super shocked if I come away because it's been talked up, feeling like it underwhelmed me a little bit, and maybe it'd be a number four. So, but
Interesting.
yeah, because Mississippi State wasn't talked up, and I think it overachieved in my mind
Hmm.
significantly. But I've
Hmm.
got some expectations for Bryce Williams based on what I've heard. And
Hmm.
the most annoying fan to this day that I ever sat next to was a Tennessee South Carolina game. Remember when Pilardi hit the walk off?
Yep.
He was kicking that right towards me, baby. I
Oh,
was
that's
in
awesome.
Y6. He was kicking it right towards me. And I sat next to the most annoying fan ever, South Carolina fan. He had black pants on with freaking chickens all over him like an idiot. And he was awful. I mean, just awful. And that man was nowhere to be found after that football went through those uprights. And he talked about their stadium and how it was like Neyland wasn't that bad. And I mean, I was like, there's no chance that your little stadium in South Carolina is as rowdy as this place is right now. There's no chance
Yeah, there's no
and
way.
there's no way.
Lying
And
through their
so,
teeth.
and I've heard people since then talk about it's pretty rowdy. So I've got some high expectations for it. So they better bring it. So I won't be shocked if they underwhelm me.
Well, yeah, that's interesting. I really anticipate it beating out Bryant Denny for me. I think it's going to probably come in at number two for me, if I had to guess.
Yeah.
And I don't know. South Carolina just to me is like they have more firepower than Mississippi State, but it's kind of that same kind of tier, I would say. But I just expect them to be insane, hungry, and I think it's going to be a really rowdy environment.
Yeah.
And I think the only reason it wouldn't beat out Ben Hill Griffin for me is just because of the size. It's a smaller stadium, so I just don't think it's going to be able to keep up with Ben Hill Griffin.
Yeah.
And because Tennessee Florida is such a big rivalry game,
Sure.
I just don't see how they could surpass it. But we'll see. It's going to be an interesting trip, and hope Tennessee can find a win.
Yeah. We
So
haven't played them in a bit. So it'll be a little bit of it's a soft rivalry, kind of renewed.
right.
And, get to see Shane Beamer. So that'll be great.
Oh gosh, I can't stand that guy.
Lenore
But
Sellers, we all know how highly touted he is. So
Linares. All right.
Lenars. See, I don't
All
even
right,
know his
bud.
name.
No, that's just how Shane Beamer says it. Real,
Lenars.
Linares, which I respect the country accent, but anyways. All right, well, listener, thank you for listening. Nick, you want to go ahead and plug our socials?
Absolutely. First off, thank you for listening. We hope that you will share this with your fellow Vol fans that are struggling through this just like we are. And you can tell them that they can find us on Spotify, on Apple Podcasts. You can find our video stream on YouTube. And you can follow us on X at VOLatile_1998. And that's where we post our YouTube every Thursday morning. So please let everybody know, especially if you go into the workplace and you're by that water cooler and your fellow Vol fan that's just down because maybe they're not as intuitive as us and maybe they thought we were going to beat Vanderbilt because we're playing in Thompson Bowling Arena. We're playing in Food City Center. And they were jacked up for that game and the Vols let them down. We were prepared for it, but not everybody was. So they may need to have somebody to talk them through it. And so you can tell them that we're here. We'd love for them to listen. So thank you for listening, and be sure to like and subscribe and follow us and check us out every Thursday morning.
Yep, absolutely. And remember, it's terminal.